Sunday morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Panic in the air. Whispers of war in Ukraine, the stock market selling off, murder and lawlessness spiking as Democrats run for cover. And on top of multiple crises hurting the American people, President Biden publicly opens the door for Russia to invade Ukraine.
It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc.
Coming up, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton on the foreign policy blunders that keep on coming. Then the Beijing Olympics now just a week away as the Chinese Communist Party threatens athletes to shut up and an NBA owner obliges.
Nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really care, and I think that's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care.
Are U.S. athletes in danger as they head to Beijing, as Marsha Blackburn warned just last week on this program?
We know that the Chinese Communist Party chose to disappear a tennis player. I'm very concerned about the safety and security of these athletes and what they may be exposed to while they're there.
Coming up, Boston Celtics center Enes Freedom on the NBA in China. Plus, pictures like this, crime and destruction, murder at 25-year highs and inflation spiking. The realities of America today pushing more Americans to the right than ever before as Joe Biden attacks Republicans.
What are Republicans for? What are they for? Name me one thing they're for.
Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich on the GOP priorities on the road ahead with the midterm primaries now just 1 month away, and a new Gallup survey reporting more Americans now favor the Republican Party. And then you will not see any of this on the mainstream media today. Censorship, buying votes, political maneuvering at big tech sent this leading Republican into the world of business. Newly named CEO of the Trump Media and Technology Group, Devin Nunes, is here on his plans to take on Twitter and Facebook with Truth Social. His launch plans coming up. It's all right here, right now on Sunday Morning Futures. And first this morning, we have breaking news. The State Department is ordering families of U.S. Embassy staff in Ukraine to begin evacuating the country as soon as tomorrow, with expectations that the U.S. will encourage all Americans to leave Ukraine by commercial flights, quote, while those flights are still available, one official said. The Biden administration sent 200,000 pounds of lethal aid to Ukrainian soldiers over the weekend, with more arms from the U.S. military stockpiles expected this upcoming week to fight a potential Russian invasion. An attack could be imminent after Vladimir Putin amassed 100,000 Russian troops on the Ukraine border, and Joe Biden seemingly gave Putin an opening to do so during his speech on Wednesday.
My guess is he will move in. He has to do something. I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades. And it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera.
Joining me right now is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He sits on the Senate Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. And Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Good morning to you.
Thank you, Maria. Good to be on with you.
Are you expecting Russia to invade Ukraine?
Well, Maria, Vladimir Putin has certainly set the conditions to invade. This is the most dangerous time in Eastern Europe in years, maybe decades, to have a major war between two nation states. I think we should take a step back, though, and ask ourselves how we got here and why it matters. Vladimir Putin has said that he can't tolerate Ukraine joining NATO. That's a pretext. There's no plan for Ukraine to join NATO, or that he can't accept large numbers of American combat troops in Ukraine. That's a pretext as well. We've never had large numbers of combat troops there, only a few trainers from time to time. What he really wants is to reassemble the greater Soviet Russia empire that he thinks it was a geopolitical catastrophe when it collapsed in the 1990s. And he wants to have a non-democratic buffer zone. So the Russian people can't look to places like Ukraine or Georgia and say, if democracy works in those countries, why shouldn't it work in ours? That's what Vladimir Putin has always wanted, though. So why is it that now he's put more than 100,000 troops on our border. And there, I think President Biden bears a lot of the blame. For a year, he's been appeasing Vladimir Putin. He gave him a very one-sided nuclear arms control treaty the very first month of his presidency. He removed sanctions from the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Germany, which his own party opposed. He really did nothing about the colonial pipeline hack. And then, of course, in August, Vladimir Putin, like the rest of the world, saw Joe Biden's debacle in Afghanistan. So that's why Vladimir Putin thinks the timing is right here, and why this matters for the American people. It is very dangerous when you allow our adversaries like Russia and China and Iran to try to upend the status quo, and all we do is have strongly worded speeches or some mealy-mouthed sanctions. So if Vladimir Putin can get away with this in Ukraine, what does that say to Xi Jinping about what he can do in Taiwan, or what he can do to threaten our military positions in the Western Pacific, what he can do to continue to cheat on trade deals to take jobs and wealth away from this country? That's why the American people care about what happens in Eastern Europe, is because it emboldens and encourages our adversaries everywhere if we simply look the other way when Vladimir Putin might invade Ukraine.
Yeah, I want to get to China and the Taiwan potential in a moment, but let me stay on Eastern Europe for a moment, because not sanctioning the Nord Stream 2 pipeline basically gave Europe this dependability on Russia. I mean, Germany now needs that gas from Russia. Will Germany stand in the way of stopping Russia from invading Ukraine?
I'm afraid they might, Maria. This week, Germany has not only refused to provide Ukraine with anti-armor and anti-aircraft weapons, they're actually blocking other NATO countries from providing those weapons to Ukraine. This is in part because Germany is now so dependent on Russian gas. Look, Germany made extremely poor policy choices about energy over the last decade, shutting down all of its nuclear power plants, for instance. That made them even more dependent than they already were on Russian gas. Now, with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline going through the Baltic Sea, you're in a situation where Germany has secured its energy supply without taking into account the consequences that'll have on countries not only like Ukraine, but NATO allies like Poland. Russia is now going to be able to turn off the gas to those countries in the winter with no consequences for Germany. That means that the German government will be much less likely to take a firm stance against Russia. This is just another example in the long lines of bad decisions and appeasing decisions that the German government across two different administrations has made towards Russia.
Well, what about the bad decisions we've made, frankly? I mean, we've got oil prices now back up to $86, $87 a barrel, gasoline up 60% year over year, and we, too, the United States, is depending on oil from Russia because Joe Biden canceled the XL pipeline and moved the priorities toward electric.
Yeah, Maria, what's happened in Germany over the last 10 years is really a cautionary tale about what would happen in the United States if we implemented something like the Green New Deal. Because as you say, we've already reduced our energy independence, and therefore we haven't been able to export more of our energy. What we should have been doing is producing even more oil and gas and turning some of that gas, for instance, into liquefied natural gas, which we could then export to Germany. So Germany would have a reliable energy source from the United States as opposed to depending on Russia.
Senator, what about the timing? Do you think Putin is imminently going to invade, or does he need more time before invading Ukraine? What are your thoughts on timing?
Maria, I think he could invade at any moment. I think probably, according to all the reports I've seen, he's probably maybe 1 to 3 weeks away from being fully prepared, having all the combat enabling troops that he needs, for instance. So say medevac and Kazovac on the border. He may also want to wait a little bit later into the depths of winter when the ground is more fully frozen for ease of maneuver for tracked vehicles like armored personnel carriers and tanks. I don't think we can be complacent, though, and think that we have a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. This could happen at any moment. This is why it's so important that we be clear about the kind of sanctions we would impose on Russia's oil and gas and mining and minerals industries, how we'd cut them off from the international banking system, and that we all continue to try to provide the weapons that Ukraine needs to defend itself.
And why would he say it depends on what kind of incursion it is? If it's a minor incursion, the U.S. might act differently. Are his intelligence staff telling him this? Was this a conversation he had with Putin?
I have no idea why Joe Biden would say something like that in public. I mean, it could be a blunder of historic proportions, much like when Dean Acheson said that our security perimeter didn't include South Korea, and a short time after North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950. There's a reason why Joe Biden went out and cleaned that up the next day, why so many of his underlings tried to clean it up over the next 24 hours. But unfortunately, Vladimir Putin saw what the rest of the world saw. When Joe Biden was speaking off the cuff, spontaneously, he said that a minor incursion might divide NATO and might make a response harder. When Joe Biden was speaking off talking points, or when his press secretary was speaking, it was a different tune. But I think Vladimir Putin knows what Joe Biden really thinks. It's when he's speaking spontaneously.
Senator, I want to ask you about China. Let's slip in a short break. Then I want to get into domestic issues. Joe Biden said the upcoming midterm elections will only be free and fair if the Democrat voting bills pass, forcing the White House to walk back those words as well. We'll talk elections, economy, and the broken Biden agenda with Senator Tom Cotton when we come right back. Stay with us.
And well invested, well protected.
Do you still believe the upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate?
Well, it all depends on whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election. I think it easily can be illegitimate.
President Biden questioning the legitimacy of the upcoming midterm elections. According to Rasmussen's daily presidential tracking poll, Biden's approval rating tumbled to a new record low of 20% following that solo press conference this week. Just the second press conference of his administration. I am back with Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. And Senator, so now I guess it's okay to question the legitimacy of an election. Now we can.
Yeah, Maria, I think you and I are both old enough that we can remember when you question very risky, dangerous practices that were put in place in 2020, that it was an insurrection and endangering democracy. What Joe Biden is complaining, though, is not about restrictions on the right to vote. States have not restricted the right to vote. They made it easier to vote in many cases, but just harder to cheat. He is simply trying to cover up for what I think is going to be a disastrous election for his party because of his failed policies and rising inflation, rising crime, and a chaotic southern border. He's trying to find excuses in advance for why they're about to be beaten very badly at the polls in November.
Will they be able to get their voting bills through at this point, or is that dead? And what about the rest of the agenda? Are they going to come back and try to get through some kind of a massive spending plan at some point in the next couple of months?
No, Maria, they're not going to pass these election takeover bills. We were able to defeat them last week with all 50 Republicans united and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin standing up to the radicals in their own party, even though they sponsor the bills, refusing to break the rules of the Senate, to change the rules of the Senate. So I suspect they will come back to their massive $5 trillion spending bill. Joe Manchin said he couldn't support it in its current form last month. But I think they're going to try to take another run at hundreds of billions of dollars of spending on climate change and green energy. And as we discussed earlier, that could have devastating effects not only for jobs and prosperity in our country, but also for our energy independence. And also, it's going to have very negative effects on inflation, which is where they should be focusing. I mean, the Biden administration is suffering right now in part because they're not focusing on Americans' priorities, like getting inflation under control or getting shelves restocked, stopping the crime that we see in so many cities, and getting our southern border under control. That's where Congress should be focusing.
Yeah, and I spoke with one CEO yesterday who told me that the chip shortage got worse at the end of last year, and we are going to have a very tough year in terms of the supply shortage and the disruptions that we're seeing. There are some people now expecting a recession because of all of these issues. I know that the Biden administration is trying to push through new nominees, and he is nominating Sarah Bloom Raskin as the head overseer of banks, and he's making climate change. She wants to make climate change a key priority for banking. Will she get through, do you think?
Well, I hope not, and I hope that President Biden pulls back all of his nominees to the Federal Reserve, because they've had a record of failure now for the last year in trying to keep inflation under control. But as you say, Sarah Bloom Raskin, or for that matter, Laurel Brainerd, who at a hearing in Congress wouldn't even answer if she was a capitalist or a socialist. They're not going on the Federal Reserve to fulfill its core mission, which is a stable monetary supply, to have stable prices and get inflation under control. They want to use the Federal Reserve to impose climate change policies on private businesses. Oftentimes they're acting in concert with major Wall Street banks. BlackRock, for instance, just sent out a letter to its CEOs and companies in which it invests saying, if you're not engaged in woke policies in your company, we may disinvest. This is all really just a kind of domestic American version of the social credit scores which the Chinese Communist Party imposes on its people. Government and big banks working together to try to enforce woke social and economic policies on private businesses.
Well, it's actually quite extraordinary. You mentioned BlackRock. They are perfectly fine operating in China. They've told their investors to up their investments in Chinese companies by 3 times, and yet they are attacking American companies for fossil fuels. Last time I checked, China was the biggest polluter in the world. I've got to get your take on China. A moment ago, you said, what will this Ukraine situation mean for Xi Jinping as he eyes Taiwan? When do you expect China to invade Taiwan?
Well, I think Xi Jinping believes today that his military is capable of invading Taiwan. They can execute that operation if he gives the order, if America doesn't come to its support. Now, there are reasons why he might not do that imminently, like the Winter Olympics that are coming up, or the Party Congress later this year, in which the Chinese Communist Party will give him an unprecedented third 5-year term in power. But after that, I think when the geopolitical conditions are right, maybe when the light and weather data is suitable in the Taiwan Strait, especially if Vladimir Putin pulls off an invasion of Ukraine, you could see Xi Jinping go for the jugular in Taiwan. That's why it's so important that we stand by our commitments around the world, and that we be especially clear that we will come to Taiwan's support to defend its democracy and its autonomy.
And real quick before you go, Senator, you were among the few who wanted a total boycott, not just a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. We're about to talk with Enes Freedom coming up. Do you worry that our athletes are going to be under a pressure in any way? Gordon Chang said that the CCP is going to try to get their DNA. What are our athletes about to face?
Yeah, very much so, Maria. Last summer, I asked the Biden administration their plan to protect our athletes and coaches and staff from things like DNA harvesting under the guise of coronavirus testing, for instance, or around-the-clock electronic surveillance, or just outright arbitrary detention and hostage taking. The Biden administration had no answer for that, so a couple months ago I called for a complete and total boycott. As these Olympics approach, my fears are growing. China is requiring all persons coming into the country for the Olympics to download an app on their phone, which has all kinds of back doors to it. They recently arbitrarily arrested and detained one of their own most famous tennis players. If they'll do that to one of their own tennis players, what do you think they'll do to an American athlete, especially if that American athlete speaks up on behalf of, say, Tibetans or Hong Kongers or Taiwan? I think it's very dangerous to send our athletes and coaches there. These Olympics should be postponed anyway because of the coronavirus raging across China. That happened in Tokyo Olympics. It's a much, much smaller set of Olympics. These can be rebid and conducted a year from now.
Wow, what incredible story playing out here. Senator, it's great to catch up with you. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. We so appreciate it.
Thank you, Maria.
Senator Tom Cotton. We'll be right back with Enes Freedom.
One fastest growing men's health brand in America.
Lesbian, nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really care, and I think that's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very hard. I'm telling you personally don't care. I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth, okay? Of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line.
Well, yes, that was ugly. That was Chamath Palihapitiya, part owner of the NBA team, the Golden State Warriors, when asked about doing business in China, despite Beijing's human rights abuses. Now, 2 administrations have characterized the CCP's treatments of the Uyghurs, ethnic minorities in Xinjiang, as genocide, both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. Boston Celtics player Enes Freedom has called out the CCP for these abuses and has called out the NBA for working alongside the CCP. He joins me now. Enes, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Maria. Appreciate it.
Give us your reaction to Mr. Palihapitiya.
That day I had a game at 12:30, and 30 minutes before the game, my manager actually texted me that video. And after I watched it, I was very angry, very disappointed, and very disgusted by his nasty comments. And now I think the whole world knows, what's happening to Uyghurs. is one of the worst, maybe the worst human rights abuses in the world today. And for him to go out there and say it's below his line to care, it was disgusting. I mean, people know that people are getting tortured and raped there. And when he says he could care less as an NBA owner, it really hurt me. And I mean, I don't know if people knows about it, but he actually Chamath owns a company called Social Capital, and they pretend to care about the social values, and this is a virtue signaling. He pretends to care about the others and stuff, but the only thing he cares about is CCP propaganda. And when he said in the U.S. it's happening the same thing, and CCP has just a different system, he lost me, and I was very angry by it.
Well, it's not just him, though, right, Enes? I mean, look at the NBA. Look at your colleague LeBron James with a $100 million investment. They've been working together to do the NBA China. I mean, why do they not see it the way you do?
I mean, first of all, after this happened, I did not see a statement from NBA. I saw a statement from Chamath and the Warriors, but the one thing that really caught my attention, there was not one time that they mentioned Uyghurs, because they know they have so much, business and, going on in China. They did not want to mess it up. And I think it's a shame. And I feel like people need to care more about what's going to the humanity than money. But I feel like we just need to keep these people accountable.
Well, you've been out there trying to educate people in terms of what is really happening on the ground, but the NBA and some of your colleagues, LeBron James, LA Lakers, they're tied to China. So do you think at the end of the day, this is all about money? It doesn't matter how the CCP acts. It doesn't matter that the CCP has said it wants to overtake the United States as the #1 superpower and will use its military might to do so. As long as they're making money because of the 1.4 billion potential customers of basketball, then they're fine with anything that the CCP does? Is that what it comes down to?
NBA every year making around $5 billion from China. And I look at the numbers, actually. Just last year, there are more people watched NBA in China than American population, over 400 million people. And yes, it is, to them, it is all about money. It is all about business. It is all about endorsement deals. It's sad because, I'm just keep asking people to that, if your mother, if your daughter, if your sister, if your wife was in those concentration camps and getting tortured and raped, would you still remain silent? So I feel like we need to do some empathy and hold these, dictatorships accountable.
Enes, we wanted to talk with you about the upcoming Olympics because some of the athletes that are going to Beijing to play in the Winter Games. The Winter Games begin February 4th, and we spoke with Senator Marsha Blackburn last week on this program about what our athletes might face. Here's what she said about the upcoming Winter Games. Listen to this.
We know that the Chinese Communist Party chose to disappear a tennis player. I'm very concerned about the safety and security of these athletes and what they may be exposed to while they're there.
So what do you think, Enes? What will our athletes face when they go to Beijing?
First of all, the Team USA just announced to all the athletes and said, bring your burner phone, because China is going to tap into your phone. I'm like, this is crazy. And also, I'm keep telling this all those people, you want to go there, I understand, but the Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party, does not represent the Olympic core, values of excellence, of respect, of friendship. And I believe and many people out there believe that they're a brutal dictatorship and they engage in censorship, they threaten the freedoms, they do not respect human rights. And whenever I have a conversation with these Olympic athletes, I'm like, listen, all the gold medals in the world you can win in the world is not more important than your morals, your values, and your principles. We need to stand up. I understand, diplomatic boycott. It's good, but I believe it's not enough, And I feel like, it just shame on International Olympic Committee that organizing games, Olympic Games in a country like China. So I feel like, IOC sleeps in the same bed with China, and it's a shame. And I think just recently I just read that, while the athletes are there, they're not allowed to make any kind of statements or they will get in trouble or something. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read that, a couple of days ago. And it's just crazy. Yeah. Look what happened. Look what they do to their own tennis player. Are we really going to feel safe to send our player to in a country like China?
Yeah, no, you're right. China has warned foreign Olympic athletes against speaking out on politics, on anything against China at the Winter Games. They've hired a PR company to make their branding better on social media. So what's the conversation among athletes right now in terms of what U.S. athletes might have to face when they get to China?
First of all, like I said again, they are not going to bring their first, the phone they own. They are going to bring, a burner phone, laptop, iPad, because they know that there is a high percent chance that China is going to tap into that. And I believe that, right. The Chinese government told them they have to download some kind of app, which is very suspicious that I don't think anyone wants to do it. And the other thing is, obviously they work so hard to get to that point. They all understand it, but do they really want to take that risk and put their name on games that go to a game where, I call it the genocide games. Do they really want to participate in games like that? So I feel like, they need to think twice about going to a country like China.
Well, certainly the surveillance is real. We know that. Enes, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for weighing in on this. We will talk soon. Enes Kanter, Freedom, joining us this morning in that exclusive. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Maria, for having me.
All right, quick break. And then coming up, the other Ukraine angle. After investigating attacks on President Trump, Devin Nunes uncovered the Ukraine-Russia conflicts for Joe Biden. Former congressman turned social media executive Devin Nunes is here for his first television interview since leaving public office to run President Trump's new media and technology company. His plan to take on big tech, along with new details on Biden's Ukraine entanglements. Next. Welcome back. One of Washington, D.C.'s ultimate truth tellers, Devin Nunes, retired from Congress last month to become the CEO of Trump Media and Technology Group. Devin Nunes joins me now in his first television interview since leaving public office, and it is good to see you this morning, Devin. Thanks very much for being here.
It's great to be with you, Maria. Great to be back on in different capacity.
Yeah,
now.
Congratulations on the new job. We are all waiting to see what plays out with Truth Social and Trump Media and Technology Group. When will you launch Truth Social?
Well, for sure, we'll launch it by the end of this quarter. So one of the challenges that we have with big tech is that they don't want us to succeed. So we have to make sure that not only we build all of our own infrastructure as much as possible, but we also have to vet the partners that we will have. So for example, Rumble, which is a YouTube alternative, we're going to be partnering with them on certain aspects. They're one of the only big social media companies that have actually been able to get a fortified beachhead and survive against big tech. So we're looking for partners like that will ensure, to the best of our ability, that once we do go live, we will have a safe place that big tech cannot cancel. So those are the types of things that we're working on right now, and we're excited because we're preparing to launch here in the next 60 days.
So you're going to launch by the end of March. That means I know that you're going to be doing testing before then in February. That's right around the time that the primaries begin. What role will Truth Social have in the primary and the midterm elections?
Well, I think what you're seeing now, Maria, from what happened over a year ago when the canceling just went full scale, where Americans, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans, got booted from the social media companies. This is what really changed my opinion. I was one of the first guys to be shadow banned, the first guys to be impacted, several years ago by these social media companies. But when you start not only keeping off information like they did that actually swayed the election right before the election, but then you start kicking not only the President of the United States off of social media, but millions of their followers. I went around the country last year, and I think people were just shocked. So when this opportunity came up to help build something new, and not just social media, but looking at the whole playing field of other sectors where this cancel culture, so-called woke culture, has taken over these big corporations and big tech companies. It was really something I felt it was a calling that I had, and it was something that I see as something larger than where I was at, because I think this is needed, not only for the United States, but for everywhere around the globe, quite frankly.
Yeah, and what you said to me yesterday was that this is going to be open to everyone. It's not going to have the algorithms that you see in other social media companies that point you to a certain narrative or sway you.
Yeah, I would say this too, that we're not looking to be a conservative or Republican only. I mean, really, if you notice what happened a year ago, just think from where we started. It was like, okay, we don't like conservatives, big tech sided with the left, and they banned a bunch of conservatives. Well, now you're starting to see they're also targeting, any liberal or any moderate who raises any question about COVID of any kind, you're banned or you're shadow banned. So these are the types of things that we want to create a safe place on the internet that's not only family friendly, that's going to follow all the laws on the books, but also a place where you're not stuck in some internet ghetto because of your political affiliation or your political ideas. So this is really an opportunity not only for millions of Americans to get their voice back that are conservative, but I think also independents and moderates, where just recently we've seen people come out, like Joe Rogan, I think a well-known independent who's expressed his frustration with big tech, and the list goes on and on. So hopefully we'll be a place not just for social media, political expression, but also for sports, arts, and entertainment.
And of course, we saw that right before the 2020 election when social media blocked all the information about the Biden family and the money that it received from various foreign countries. I want to switch gears and ask you what you learned during your time. You did such a good job in Congress in terms of rooting out corruption. You were defending the Republicans, leading the Republican investigation into the impeachment trial of President Trump during the Ukraine investigation. Tell me what you learned about Ukraine and what you came away from that investigation with.
Well, just remember, right before the election, the Hunter Biden laptop story was banned by all social media. And not only that, you had high-level former military and intelligence and so-called foreign leaders in the United States of America who sided with big tech and made up a false story that this was somehow Russian disinformation. Now, look, we all know that what the Russians have been doing for 75 years, it's no secret. They try to sow discord in our country. And they were very successful. Big tech did exactly what the Russians wanted them to do. All these so-called experts did exactly what the Russians wanted them to do. And now, fast forward, where are we today? Remember, the invasion of Ukraine started in 2014 under Obama and Biden. It was the Obama-Biden administration that wanted to give them blankets. And then it was this Hunter Biden laptop where the information existed when they were impeaching a president over this. Clearly the information was out there that it was really the Bidens who had issues, not just with Ukraine, taking money from Ukraine, but also Russia, also China. So going back to the Russians started this invasion under Obama and Biden back in 2014. They smell weakness, and I believe what they're going to do is probably force the hands of the Ukrainian people and basically put a choice in their hands of, do they really want to fight and have bloodshed, or is Putin going to be able to install someone that he can control, which is kind of an old Soviet tactic and a tactic that's been used by dictators throughout history.
So do you think Biden has conflicts of interest in Ukraine and Russia, and that's dictating his decisions around the potential invasion of Ukraine by Russia?
Well, I think one thing is for sure that big tech and the fake news media complex in this country help cover up evidence that clearly, this was major evidence that sat on that laptop. The FBI had it for over a year. Nothing was done with it. So, in a normal world, unlike the one that we live in now with this dystopian media that we have in social media, you would have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of media folks, reporters, investigative reporters doing work on this. Sadly, you've only had a few places that have actually covered this story. And then you would know, I think the American people deserve the right to know, what is it that the Russians the Chinese or the Ukrainians have on politicians in this country. That information is known to the FBI, but yet the American people still don't have a clue.
Devin, we will be watching. Thanks very much. We appreciate you joining us. Devin Nunes,
my
stay with
pleasure.
us. Newt Gingrich is here. He's up next. Welcome back. President Biden was in Atlanta earlier this month attacking Republicans in a last-ditch effort to keep Democrats in power and federalize all elections. According to my next guest, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Biden's race baiting is not only ironic, it is hypocritical, and it is destroying America. Newt Gingrich is the former Speaker of the House. He is a Fox News contributor, and he joins me now. Newt, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much. We see the polls. We see America rejecting the Biden agenda, and yet what do we hear from the president? Voting bills that must happen or the elections won't be legitimate. Your thoughts?
Well, I think they've talked themselves into a dead end. The Biden, Harris, Schumer, Pelosi team, for reasons I don't understand, went out of their way to pick things they can't get done. They knew that they did not have Senator Manchin. They didn't have Senator Sinema. They knew they were going to lose the vote in the Senate. They just keep pounding on it. And by the way, these are not very popular bills. I mean, if you ask people, do they want to see more spending to have even more inflation? The answer is overwhelmingly no. If you ask people, do they want to have a bill which would block identifying voters by identity? The fact is, photo IDs are acceptable to about 87% of all Americans because they want an honest election, not a rigged election. So, but this goes on and on. Biden wants us to worry about the border in Ukraine. The American people are worried about the border with Mexico. And you have a gasoline problem, which is going to get worse. And so Biden is calling on Russia. At the same time, he's trying to pressure Putin. He's hoping the Russians will pump more oil, which will give them more money to build their military even stronger. I mean, this stuff makes no sense if you're a normal person. But on the American left, it apparently substitutes for any kind of critical thought.
Well, that's what strikes me, Newt, because we see the poll numbers plummeting. We see Americans rejecting their agenda, and yet he's not responding to it at all. It's like he has a tin ear in terms of what's important to the American people.
Well, look, I think, big government socialism doesn't work, but the people who believe in it almost as a secular religion. They can't get off of it. And so you really end up with people who are as fanatic as the revolutionaries in the French Revolution or the revolutionaries in 1917 in Moscow. And they believe. And when you show them the facts, they reject the facts because it threatens their belief system. When Trafalgar came out with a poll this week that the Republicans may be ahead by 57-42, in terms of who you're going to vote for Congress, that would be a landslide that would take you back probably to 1920 to have a Republican Congress that was that strong. And it would mean probably picking up 6 or 7 seats in the Senate and between 40 and 70 seats in the House. You'd think at that point that the Democratic leadership would get together and say, this ain't working. Instead, they get together and they start chanting, we got to get this done, even though nobody outside their group wants it.
Yeah, I want to talk about that poll that basically said more Americans are choosing Republicans over Democrats. Let's slip in a short break and talk about that and the GOP priorities this year and beyond. Stay with us. Newt Gingrich is here. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. I am back with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Newt, you were out with an op-ed recently titled "The Wolves Will Become Sheep." Walk us through that op-ed and what's taking place right now in Washington.
Sure. Well, you have both with Attorney General Garland and with this select committee on January 6th, people who've run amok. They are breaking the rules. They are going after people in a way which is reminiscent of the British monarchy using closed-door systems that we outlawed deliberately because we'd seen it. We knew what it was like. And they're running over people's civil liberties. And what they need to understand is on January 4th next year, you're going to have a Republican majority in the House, and a Republican majority in the Senate. And all these people who've been so tough and so mean and so nasty are going to be delivered subpoenas for every document, every conversation, every tweet, every email, because I think it's clear that these are people who are literally just running over the law, pursuing innocent people, causing them to spend thousands and thousands of dollars in legal fees for no justification. And it's basically a lynch mob. And unfortunately, the Attorney General of the United States has joined that lynch mob and is totally misusing the FBI. And I think when you have a Republican Congress, this is all going to come crashing down, and the wolves are going to find out that they're now sheep, and they're the ones who are, in fact, going to, I think, face a real risk of jail for the kind of laws they're breaking.
Well, this is such great analysis. Meanwhile, you see more Americans leaning to the right in the face of all of these policies.
Well, look, the Democrats are losing on two fronts. They're losing on a reality front. I mean, every time you go to buy gasoline, you're reminded they're incompetent. And they're losing on a policy front. People don't want a socialist, left-wing, radical America. So they have a two-front fight. They're going to lose both fronts. And I think it's going to lead to one of the largest tsunamis in American history as they get thrown out.
Yeah. All right, Newt, it's great to catch up with you. Please come back soon. Newt Gingrich, that'll do it for us. I'll see you tomorrow on Fox Business Mornings with Maria, and catch this program again later today at 3 p.m. Have a good Sunday.